father always told me, survival is never certain. And when there are no more leaders to follow, you must become one.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest, Mr. Tommy Walter. Hi, Tommy.
Hey, Luke.
Tommy, I have you here today to kick off this series of talking to composers. I'm starting with you. Thank you for doing this. So the first thing I sort of wanted to do with this little series is sort of break down for people that there's something in between learning to play music and being John Williams, the composer of everything that's ever happened. And you know, every little thing you hear on TV is being composed by some musician. And I think there's also like a misnomer, I guess, like about calling yourself a composer. People think you have like the ones and
Yeah.
which I don't know. For all I know, you do have that. You do that occasionally.
I can. It's
Yeah.
the idea of conducting in front of an orchestra is really terrifying.
Yeah, I bet.
And I've done it in college,
Uh-huh.
but I haven't yet done it in my composer career. And maybe I will, but I haven't been brave enough quite yet to do it.
Yeah. So I should mention that Tommy, well, he was in the USC marching band, so
Right on.
you do have stuff outside of rock. But Tommy is the brain and the artist behind the name Abandoned Pools. Which I think has some new music in the works, correct?
Yes. It's I got like 5 songs that I'm just chipping away at. And
Nice.
I did a Kickstarter last year. I owe a lot of people an album, and it's just getting pushed and pushed and pushed. I swear it'll be done eventually.
Tommy was also the bass player, the original bass player in the band The Eels. And as already mentioned, Tommy is a composer. I would also like to point out that, Tommy, you afforded me a bunch of rock and roll dreams that I may or may not have been able to pull off without your assistance. But I played with Tommy in Abandoned Pools, and in that year or so long stint, I got to do like a tour of arenas, which was something I'd never done before.
So
a few
much
big
fun.
shows here and there because of radio things in the 90s,
Yeah.
but that was a whole summer of playing big giant shows, opening for Lenny Kravitz. And
Crazy.
I got to play the Tonight Show because of you. And I don't know, just did a lot of cool adventures that I don't take lightly. So thank you for that.
Oh, dude, that was so much fun. I remember you and I would get off the bus and sort of walk around the arena or like the amphitheater and be like, we're playing here today.
Yeah,
This is where we're playing, you know?
Yeah, so
It
good.
felt so good. That was such a good feeling. So yeah, it was so much fun having you along.
Yeah, that's a big deal to me.
Awesome.
That whole
Me too.
excursion.
Me too, man. That was the life we were living there for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tommy also brought me into a croquet league, which is another fun thing that I wouldn't have gotten to do without his invite. So tell me, like, first of all, what would you say is some things that people have probably seen your score work in and would maybe have no idea, like commercials or television shows, or just tell me a few things.
Well, I think the biggest thing so far is like because there's always you do this too, I think, where you just like you make tracks and they go out in the wild and they find their places, on TV shows and what have you. We've had like good placements over the years, just some with abandoned pools and then some with just like stuff I've done on my own. But like, I think the one that I'm really proud of was the trailer that came out for Disney Plus, like the first time they're announcing Disney Plus.
Uh-huh.
And I remember waking up like 7 a.m., which is not like me, over the summer specifically, and just like kind of scrolling through Twitter, and all of a sudden, I'd already followed Disney Plus, and all of a sudden I'm looking at this and there's like, oh, that's cool. There's like Yoda on this right here. And I click on it and it's Yoda, and I'm like, oh my God, that's my track.
Something exciting. Something authentic and true. Everything changes now.
And snap.
What's next? The future. That's our specialty. Woohoo!
Do you trust me?
Yes. May the Force be with us.
To infinity and beyond!
It's like a dream. A wonderful dream come true.
You have something very rare. You have magic.
Oh my gosh. And it's just like, just to see your music behind all that rad footage of these famous movies, specifically Star Wars for me. And it's an orchestral track too. So for that, like, it's fully orchestrated. So to get that placed and then that sort of high profile scenario felt really good. And to have that sort of surprise too.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's a fantasy you didn't know you had, was your music playing over Yoda.
I do know I have that fantasy. Like, where's my in the corner I have a little picture of an X-wing and it says "Stay on target."
Nice.
That's my Death Star.
Red 5, I'm going in.
That's right. So,
well, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't at least bring up the fact that you composed the theme for the original Clone High. That is a known factor, right?
That is a known factor, yes.
Way back in the 1980s, secret government employees dug a vein in the skies and ladies, and made out using genetic copies. Now the clones are sexy teens. Now they're gonna make it if they try. Lovely learning, sharing, judging. Time to laugh and shiver and cry. It's time to watch Clone High.
And I
I
even
did it
got
on the-
animated in the original.
Of course. Oh my gosh, right. Of course, you were animated. Hell
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you, Stamos. You've had a good run. Abandoned pools! Hit it!
You got it, Prom King.
And then you may, I don't know, because I remember on the Garbage Tour, we like flew you out to Toronto or something, and then you jumped on to do a show there because Pele, being Swedish, couldn't leave the country, wasn't sure if he could get back.
Yeah, he was kind of walking a fine line with his citizenship, and so which is really how I got the gig. I mean, Pele was by all accounts the guitar player that you wanted in the band, but it just got to be too messy with going to Japan and going and
All that.
national TV. Basically, all the super fun rad stuff
I know.
he couldn't do. So it was
I
like,
know.
sure, I'm in. Japan for a week.
I know.
I'm free.
But the reason I bring it up because I think it might have been around that time that I was recording the theme song, because we were on like an RV for that tour, and I was on the back of the RV like doing the lead vocal, just like a single axle RV, just bouncing around.
Amazing.
And somehow it stuck, and they accepted it, which is pretty amazing. So
What if you had your druthers as a composer? What type of like media would you score for? Like what do you think you'd like to do the most, and what type of score too is sort of what's your wheelhouse?
well, I mean, that's a hard question to answer because I'm like I feel like my whole career I haven't really been able to decide, and I'm just like, well, what do you want to do? Everything.
Yeah. That's
and seriously,
that's an answer too. Everything.
it is. And even growing up, it's like, oh, I want to play French horn. I want to play bass. I want to play jazz. I
Yeah.
want to do this and that. And then, I went to USC as a French horn major and played in the symphony for a couple semesters. But then I realized like, I'm not the best horn player, like I was good enough to play in the USC symphony, but like, I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, this may not be the track for me. And so I switched to composition. And so I didn't touch the electric bass for a couple of years. But then in high school, like I was really into funk bass, but I really couldn't do that slap very well. And there's one kid at school that just shred it, right? And it just makes you feel like an inch tall. So I'm like, but that was good too, because it's like, there's that experience. And then you're like, oh, then I figure out I'm a rock bass player, right?
Yeah.
So, I want to play rock bass. I want to play rock guitar. I want to write songs. After I left the Eels, got fired from the Eels. Right?
Thanks for being clear about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. There's a couple of ways of saying that. Like once I moved on from the Eels,
Yeah.
once I got sacked, but then it's like, oh, I wanna make a record, and it's like, well, I have to learn how to sing and write songs, and then I've always had this thing, and one of my best friends in high school kind of instilled this in me. He was just like, yeah, you just go do it. You
Right.
just go do that.
Yeah.
So I guess how I'm trying to answer your question is like, I do want to kind of do everything. And I thought for a while, like maybe I'm just too all over the place and too scattered, but it turns out that's a pretty good way of approaching scoring in general. Because this job I'm working on now, they asked me to do like a jazz saxophone thing. They asked me to do like all these different styles.
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, yeah, I think I can do that.
Right. Yeah.
And then it's like, the other thing about that is you never really know what you can do until someone asks you to. And then you're
Totally.
like, oh, yeah, you just say yes and figure it out as you go
Yeah.
along.
Yeah.
But I guess, but to answer the question, what you're really getting at, before I started bragging about everything, was that was that I- orchestral music would be like, I think every composer wants to get into Abbey Road and like record an orchestra.
Sure. Sure.
So yes, I'd like to have a movie or a show, and that's most likely a film. In that scenario, I think to have the budget on a regular basis to have a symphony orchestra sized ensemble, and just I also feel like a lot of scores these days are like almost sound designy type scores, and
sure.
I'm more in the John Williams camp, where I feel like there's definitely, and I know it's been done a lot, but there's probably there's a more modern way you can approach that these days. So I really would love to do a film where get in there with an orchestra and like exploit the colors of the different sections and get into orchestration and get into voice leading and counterpoint and harmony and really like sort of try to flex those muscles more, because we don't always have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. In regards to, well, you being a composer and also a rock musician, and this is another one where it's like, why are you going to make me pick something when I don't have to? But let's just say gun to your head and you have to pick composing or being a rock musician, but equally as successful in either one. Could you make that choice? Or would you rather die on that mountain and get shot in the head?
Equally successful, that means like not successful in either one?
No, to be successful in one or the other. Yeah.
I think I would choose composer.
Interesting.
I think I would. I mean, like,
yeah.
I think I would. I think it's just more, there's certainly a lot of stress.
Yeah.
But I think it's more settled version of your life. I think it's more long-term version of your life. John Williams is 90.
For sure.
So
that's definitely.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the trappings of like rock stardom, and not like when we were touring with Lenny, or that was like our apex, not like we're like some massive band or something, but like there's some of it that is just not that savory, really. It's
right. Yeah.
Like,
We drank a lot because there was a lot of it's weird when you're on a bigger tour like that, there's like more downtime because you're responsible for less of what's happening. Like you don't have to drive yourself anywhere.
Right.
And you don't really set up your own gear.
Yeah.
So it's like that stuff sort of occupies you when you're in a smaller tour. Like, oh, you got to get in the car and drive, and like I can't be drunk because I got to drive, and
totally.
Whatever. It is weird. So I could see how year in, year out, you'd have to really go like, I'm not going to do that to myself on this tour, even though, I mean, you think about how little we were responsible for on that tour. I mean, you more than me because you had to do interviews and you know, things like that come with it. But you know, someone like Ron Wood, like
Mhm.
that guy literally has absolutely nothing to do except for
Yeah.
play Stone songs for a few
Yeah.
hours a night.
Yeah.
You'd have to definitely like recalibrate your, like, you know, I don't know, do exercise and eat well and all that stuff.
I think some people just get a little bit accustomed to it and that becomes their life. And then
Yeah.
when they're not touring, they don't know what to do with themselves. I
Yeah.
remember getting off like coming home from the garbage store. We were on for like a month. And like first time I got to my apartment, I like slept on the couch.
Right.
Because like, this is weird. Like I felt
Yeah.
weird. So, you know, like,
I need to feel more like on the run than just like
Yeah.
sleeping in
Yeah.
my own bed.
yeah, like this is too quiet and too mellow. Like
Yeah.
we're used to like sleeping on an RV or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, and you know, along with that kind of tour, like we were on a opening on a great tour, so it was like a really good scenario. But there's things going on in the background that kind of make you lose your mind a little bit. Like I remember with the record label calling people who weren't there anymore. Like the record label was slowly shutting down.
Right, yeah.
While we were on the road, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is all falling apart.
Yeah.
In the
And you're helpless
background.
because there's just nothing you can do from long
Nothing,
distance. except for-
nothing. And at one point they like threatened to take us off the road or something. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, so there was a lot of, it's great. I think it's always equally great and equally terrible.
Yeah.
You know? So
There was a lot of funny, as you're talking, memories are coming up about that tour, but
yeah.
I want to leave the people with a funny, an anecdote from that tour,
Yeah.
which was, a lot of people wouldn't know this, especially from maybe listening to your music. If they've read interviews, and they've probably heard this, but you're a huge Prince fan.
Oh yeah.
And you mentioned earlier in this interview that funk bass and that stuff, but
Yeah.
your music in and of itself doesn't like scream Prince per se, although Prince is all over the map. So you know, which Prince
Yeah.
are you talking about? But
Yeah.
I remember when we were on the road with Lenny Kravitz and we were playing in Toronto and we were sitting side stage
Yes.
and Prince showed up to the show, and it was after our gig and we were watching on the side of the stage, and Lenny Kravitz was made aware that Prince was there, and as you recall, was desperately trying to get Prince to come out and jam
Yes.
with him. Like every 3 songs or something, he'd come over to the side and say, come on, dude, let's do this. What do you,
Yes.
anything you want to do? And Tommy was losing his mind on the, we're standing next to each other. And finally he just goes, do it, like he yells, do it. And Prince looks over and says, who is that?
It's like, you know, it's
Which
just
is
like,
I don't know if you'd ever met Prince before, but that probably isn't how you intended on meeting him. Having him
No.
wonder who the hell you are.
well, yeah, and maybe I was just geeking out a little too much, but I'm excited and like I'm an emotional person, you know, like, and the whole time I was standing like 7 feet away from him, like going, that's Prince. That's Prince right there. He's right there. That's him. And my brain was like sort of like in a loop going,
Right.
that's Prince,
That's it.
There he
That's still
is.
Prince.
still there. And he had this bodyguard off to the side and he had come over to me and he's like, hey man, do you have any towels or water? I'm like, I'll take care of you because, you know, I'm just here to help you. So I got him a bottle of water and a towel. And he's like, oh, thanks, man. I'm like, no problem. And I remember it slightly different, but you're probably more accurate. But I remember, like, do you remember Kevin, who was like Lenny's assistant?
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
totally cool. Love Kevin.
Yeah.
But he was next to me, and I remember the way I remember it was like when Lenny came over and was like, hey man, let's do this. And I remember like sort of clapping with the crowd or whatever, and then turning to Kevin being like, man, that's gotta happen. And then Prince turned around and looked at me and goes, who are you? And like that Prince stare, like,
Right.
and I was like just stuck. And then like I remember like Lenny looking at me, and then like it was just like this awkward you know, and of course later on you're just like thinking of all these things you could have said to him.
Right.
But, you know.
In the moment, you're like, did my Prince fandom just get me kicked off the Lenny Kravitz tour?
I know, totally. And then like later, I'm like, did I ruin this for Lenny? Right?
Right.
Did I ruin this? But then Prince gives this guy a look, his bodyguard, and he comes over and he stands right in front of me, like his head, like right here. And I remember just being like, you gotta be kidding me. To the back of this guy's head, right?
Prince decided that your sightline needed to not have him in it anymore.
Yes, totally. Which he was probably right about. So let's take their view on this. Let's take his view on this. Like this overly excited geeky guy is freaking out behind me, which I'm used to, and sometimes that escalates to a place I'm not comfortable with. So I'm going to put my guy in front of him. It totally makes sense.
Totally.
It totally makes sense. So. And then I was like, oh, I totally blew it for Lenny. I feel terrible. I'm just awkward and uncomfortable. And then I called my mom. I'm like, Mom, Prince, talk to me. And then the next day I saw Lenny and I was like, I was just like, man, and he goes, he's like, don't worry about it. And you should feel flattered. That guy doesn't talk to anybody.
Right.
Oh yeah.
At least he cared who you were. Like he cared because he wanted you blocked, but he did care.
Right. It wasn't
mattered.
Like, it mattered, but sort of like, it wasn't like, and who do we have here?
You're right. Oh man. Well.
Oh good.
Tommy, thank you for the memories, the laughs, and thank you for doing this. And I'm going to play some Abandoned Pools. I'm going to play some Eels.
Nice.
The first record, of course, only.
Yeah, only them.
And yeah, great to talk to you. And I hope I get to see you IRL, as the kids say.
Oh, totally. It'd be fun to have you and yours out here.
Yes, we would love that.
Yeah.
Tommy, have a great one. Thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
All right, take care.